Okay, Ellie may have stepped away for a moment again, so we'll just thank you, Ellie. Okay, so welcome both to this evening's presentation. And just to kick it off with a bit of an overview of the four sections we're going to go through over the next couple of hours. The first will be a brief introduction. The second, I want to try to raise this question, why it is that some students don't like school, and look at one of the answers given to that question by one cognitive psychologist, Daniel Willingham. He has a very surprising answer to that question. Then we'll look at this idea of what cognitive load is and how we can minimize it and why it's important to do that when we're trying to teach children. And then finally looking at this concept of flexible knowledge, what that is and how we can build that over time. Now, this kind of presentation, when I've usually delivered it live and in person. And what I found is that it works best if there's a high degree of discussion. Usually the ideas that are being presented here spark a wide range of thoughts and questions in people's minds. They tend to be very new ideas, and so people have a lot of questions about them and how they can integrate that into what they're doing day to day. This will be a little bit different because, of course, we're trying to deliver this online, but I'd like to try to maintain as much of that usual discussion flow as possible. So please do feel free to enter any questions into the chat box as they come to you, and we'll try to answer them and discuss them as we go along. So to begin with, just as a bit of an overview, I wanted to talk about three figures in education, which relatively few people have heard of. But one thing that ties all three of them together is this principle that basically every child can learn. They clearly believe that quite distinctly. The first person is a guy called John Mighton. John Mighton is a tutor in Canada, and he wrote a book called The Myth of Ability. His book is relatively anecdotal, but if his anecdotes are to be believed, he's achieved quite remarkable results. He started a very small tuition company called the Jump Maths program, and over time that has grown quite dramatically in size. And he's talking about working with kids who would be in the equivalent of, say, year 6 or year 7, who are years behind where they should be. And yet, with a little bit of work, they not only catch up, but start to overtake their peers. Now, although you can always question how valid are his anecdotes, how valid are his stories, how truthful are they, the reason I believe it's probable that what he's describing is accurate is partly due to the success of the Jump Maths program and its current size, but also partly because of the techniques that he describes in the book. The techniques that he describes share something in common with instructional methods used by the next two individuals. The next person was Michel Thomas, which you may or may not have heard of before. If you have heard of Michel Thomas, just type yes into the chat box. I'll continue in the meantime. Michel Thomas is best known as a language instructor. He's sometimes known as the sort of language instructor to the stars. So he had some famous clients like Woody Allen and Eddie Izzard. But what few people do know about Michel Thomas is that he was really a pedagogue. He was very much an educationalist, and he wanted to see an educational revolution. Like John Mighton, he believed that this idea of some kids being born able to learn languages or able to learn anything, and others not being able to do it, he believed that was a complete myth, with the exception of perhaps what we could describe as a serious or significant cognitive impediment. Thomas believed that every single person is capable of learning anything that we're able to teach, and that the reason some people fail is because of us as teachers and what we do, or more precisely, often what we don't do. Michel Thomas chose languages to learn how to teach and to develop his program because partly because he was a polyglot himself. He spoke a lot of languages. It was something he knew a lot about, but also largely because he was aware that there was a stigma around language, that people believed this is something that kids have a natural gift for, or they don't. And those who don't tend to receive messages in school saying, you will never be able to speak another language, you should give up, don't bother trying. He worked, in addition to the work he did with his private work, with usually one-on-one with various different more wealthy clients, he also worked with a number of inner city schools in the United States. And there he achieved remarkable success with groups of kids who were otherwise considered to be unteachable. Approximately 15 years ago, he came to the UK and ran a program here, which was broadcast on, I think it was BBC, it might have been ITV, and that was called The Language Master. And he did a similar thing there. He took a group of 17-year-old students, all of whom had failed GCSE French, certainly one in that group who'd been told, you will never learn another language, don't bother trying, and within 1 week was able to get them all to what I would describe at least an intermediate level of French, possibly an advanced level. They could speak in the present tense, the future, and the past tense with a relative degree of ease and confidence. The final person is this guy, Siegfried Engelmann. Siegfried Engelmann is a man who has been researching instructional methodologies and instructional ideas for nearly 40 years now. He took part in a program that existed in the United States called Project Follow Through. Project Follow Through was a $1 billion program that was originally sponsored by President Lyndon Johnson. It ran for over a decade. It is the biggest longitudinal study that has ever been done in education. Its goal was to try to find the curriculum or teaching methodology that was the best, the one that would work. The results of Project Follow Through were astounding. There were 9 different programs that took part, separated into 3 different groups. One focused on what they called basic skills or academic skills. Another one focused on what they called cognitive ability or problem-solving skills. And the third focused on what they called academic self-concept, or sometimes like affect, how kids felt about themselves, their self-esteem. So one program tried to focus on more traditional academic content. The second tried to focus on problem solving. The third tried to focus on making kids feel better about themselves. The idea being if they could feel more motivated, they would be more successful. Engelmann's, there were 3 different programs in each of those 3 categories. Engelmann's was in the first. He focused on academic ability. And then they were measured, the students who went through their programs were measured for their reading ability, their mathematics ability as well, plus a few other criteria. And then they were also measured for their academic success, their ability to problem solve and transfer their knowledge, and their ability to, and their self-concept as well, how they felt about themselves. Engelmann's program was called Direct Instruction, and it dramatically outperformed every other program in every single category. It even outperformed programs that were designed to try to make kids feel better about themselves in the category of academic self-concept. It was a huge success. All 3 of these people said something similar to one another. John Mighton said that he taught, or he teaches, in a way that no child could fail to grasp. Michel Thomas said, anyone can be taught anything. And Engelmann said, I have never seen a kid that could not be taught arithmetic and language skills. All 3 of them believed that every child could learn. And I think that if we look at their programs and their instructional methods, they're all bound by a common idea. And it's those ideas that we're going to explore next.